The most disturbing aspect of this case isn't just that 24-year-old software engineer Arpana Jinaga was brutally murdered after hosting a Halloween party in her Redmond, Washington apartment. It's that despite overwhelming physical evidence, 2 trials, and nearly 11 years of investigation, her killer remains free and her case unsolved. What should have been a night of celebration with friends and neighbors turned into a horrific crime scene where Arpana was beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled, with her attacker going to extraordinary lengths to destroy evidence. The case would consume the lives of investigators, destroy the life of a wrongfully accused man who spent 9 years in jail, and leave Arpana's family without the justice they desperately seek. This is the story of a brilliant young woman whose life was cut short and a justice system that failed both victim and accused. Viewer discretion is advised. If you're interested in unsolved cases and the complexities of the criminal justice system, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel with notifications turned on for more in-depth investigations like this one. Arpana Jinaga was living the American dream in 2008. The 24-year-old had immigrated to the United States from India to pursue her education and career in technology. After graduating from Rutgers University with a degree in computer science, she had landed a coveted position as a software engineer at EMC Corporation in Bellevue, Washington. Arpana was brilliant, ambitious, and beloved by her colleagues and friends who described her as someone who lit up every room she entered. Arpana lived in the Valley View Apartments in Redmond, a diverse community that was home to many young professionals working in the Seattle area's booming tech industry. She was known for her warm personality, her love of cooking traditional Indian dishes for friends, and her enthusiasm for bringing people together. Arpana had quickly integrated into her apartment community, forming friendships with neighbors from various backgrounds and cultures. October 31st, 2008 was a Friday night, and Arpana had decided to host a Halloween party in her third-floor apartment. She had spent days preparing, decorating her apartment with Halloween themes and planning a celebration that would bring together friends from work and neighbors from her building. Arpana herself had chosen to dress as Little Red Riding Hood, a costume that would later take on tragic significance given the violence that would befall her. The party was a success, with dozens of people flowing between Arpana's apartment and other units in the building where additional celebrations were taking place. The atmosphere was festive and fun, with people in creative costumes enjoying food, drinks, and music. Arpana was the perfect hostess, moving between groups of guests, ensuring everyone was having a good time, and capturing memories with her camera throughout the evening. As the night progressed, the party began to wind down, with many guests leaving to return to their own apartments or head home. Security cameras in the building captured various people coming and going throughout the evening, creating a complex timeline that investigators would later spend years trying to piece together. Among the guests were several men who would later become persons of interest in the case, including Emmanuel Fair, a friend of Arpana's neighbor who had been invited to the party. The last confirmed sighting of Arpana alive was around 3 a.m. on November 1st, when she was seen returning to her apartment after walking some guests to their cars. She appeared to be in good spirits and showed no signs of distress or concern. Neighbors later reported hearing what they initially thought were sounds of consensual sexual activity coming from her apartment around 8 a.m., but these sounds were actually the horrific final moments of Arpana's life. When Arpana failed to show up for work on Monday, November 3rd, and didn't respond to calls or messages, her father became worried and contacted building management to request a welfare check. What they discovered when they entered her apartment was a crime scene so brutal and disturbing that it would haunt investigators for years to come. Arpana's nude body was found on her bedroom floor, and the evidence suggested she had endured a prolonged and savage attack. The medical examiner determined that Arpana had been beaten severely, gagged with duct tape, sexually assaulted, and ultimately strangled with a bootlace. However, the killer hadn't stopped there. In what appeared to be a desperate attempt to destroy evidence, motor oil had been poured over her body, her hands had been slathered with toilet bowl cleaner, and various items from the apartment had been used to try to eliminate DNA evidence. The killer had removed linens from the bed, left a comforter soaking in the bathtub, and had even attempted to burn some materials. The crime scene revealed a killer who was both savage in their violence and calculated in their attempts to cover their tracks. The extensive efforts to destroy evidence suggested someone who was either knowledgeable about forensic investigation or was simply desperate to avoid detection. Despite these efforts, investigators were able to collect significant physical evidence from the scene, including DNA samples that would become central to the case. The investigation quickly focused on the men who had been at the Halloween party, with particular attention paid to those who had remained in the building late into the night or early morning. The complex social dynamics of the party, combined with the fact that many guests had been drinking and some had used drugs, made it difficult to establish a clear timeline of events and determine who had been where at what times. Emmanuel Fair, a 27-year-old African-American man who had attended the party as a guest of Arpana's neighbor, quickly became the primary suspect in the case. Fair had a criminal history that included drug-related offenses, and his DNA was found on several items at the crime scene, including tape that had been used to gag Arpana and a bathrobe that contained her blood. However, the DNA evidence was complex and controversial, with defense attorneys arguing that it could have been transferred innocently during the party or planted by the real killer. Fair maintained his innocence throughout the investigation, claiming that while he had been at the party and had interacted with Arpana, he had not harmed her. He explained his presence at the scene by stating that he had helped clean up after the party and had used Arpana's bathroom, which could account for some of the DNA evidence. However, prosecutors argued that the location and nature of the DNA evidence pointed to his involvement in the murder. The case against Emmanuel Fair was complicated by the presence of DNA from other unidentified individuals at the crime scene, as well as questions about the investigation's focus on Fair to the exclusion of other potential suspects. Defense attorneys argued that investigators had tunnel vision and had failed to adequately investigate other men who had been at the party and had opportunity to commit the crime. One particularly controversial aspect of the case involved Cameron Johnson, another party guest whose behavior after the murder had raised suspicions. Johnson had left the area shortly after the murder and had made statements that some interpreted as suspicious. However, investigators were unable to definitively link him to the crime, and he was never charged. The defense argued that Johnson was a more likely suspect than Fair, and that the investigation had been compromised by racial bias. Emmanuel Fair's first trial began in February 2017, nearly 9 years after Arpana's murder. The trial was lengthy and complex, with prosecutors presenting the DNA evidence and arguing that Fair was the only person who could have committed the crime. The defense countered by challenging the reliability of the DNA evidence and arguing that the investigation had been flawed from the beginning. After weeks of testimony, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, resulting in a hung jury. A second trial was held in 2019, with similar arguments from both sides. This time, however, the jury found Emmanuel Fair not guilty of murder, though they convicted him on a lesser charge of failing to register as a sex offender. Fair was released from jail after serving nearly 9 years, but the acquittal meant that Arpana's murder remained officially unsolved, leaving her family without closure and justice. The Arpana Jinaga case represents one of the most complex and controversial murder investigations in recent Washington state history. The case highlights the challenges of prosecuting crimes based primarily on DNA evidence, particularly when that evidence is subject to multiple interpretations. It also raises important questions about racial bias in the criminal justice system and the dangers of tunnel vision in criminal investigations. For Arpana's family, the lack of resolution has been devastating. They traveled from India to attend both trials, hoping to see justice for their daughter, only to watch as the case ended without a conviction. They continue to advocate for renewed investigation into the case and have expressed frustration with what they see as a failed investigation that focused too narrowly on one suspect while ignoring other possibilities. If you found this examination of an unsolved murder case as compelling and tragic as we did, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel with notifications turned on. We explore complex, true crime cases that highlight both the pursuit of justice and the flaws in our legal system. Your support helps us continue investigating these important cases and keeping the memory of victims like Arpana Jinaga alive. Until next time, remember that behind every unsolved case is a family still searching for answers, and sometimes the pursuit of justice is more complicated than we'd like to believe.